Hello everyone, welcome back to our BGP hands-on lab. In today's demonstration or hands-on lab, we're going to go ahead and learn another important and very powerful concept with BGP, and it's simply called as, the route filtering, or, we do the route filtering based on prefix list. If you remember our first topology with those three router R2 and connected with two ISPs, we saw that on the router R2, we had a lot of interfaces that we had configured the loopback, and we were advertising those IP prefixes back to those ISP routers. Sometime, we have a lot more networks, but let's say the ISP routers are not interested in seeing all those prefixes or all those routes that the router R2 is sending, or on the other direction. In that case, we can go ahead and start filtering these IP prefixes, or go ahead and start filtering these routes that we would selectively only allow the routes or prefixes that we have agreed with the customer, or the route that we really need to be receiving, not the rest of the routes. So we'll go ahead and take a look at how we can go ahead and filter these IP prefixes. And to filter these IP prefixes, we'll go ahead and use the concept of prefix list. And again, this is a very powerful concept, and this is used like day in, day out, anytime when you are working with the BGP. So for this demonstration, we are still using our smaller topology of those three router R2, ISP1 router, ISP2 router. So now let's quickly go to the ISP1 router, because if you remember, the router R2 is connected with ISP router 1 and ISP router 2. So we'll take a look at the BGP routing table on ISP1 router and see what are the routes or the IP prefixes the ISP1 router is receiving from router R2. So the command to take a look at is simply the show IP BGP, and if you go ahead and press enter, in this output we can clearly again see based on the next hop, this is the IP address for the router R2. So the ISP1 router is receiving these 5 prefixes, IP prefixes or route from your router R2. And we have a 10.0.0/24, then there are /28 network. But if you really see here that the 24 can go ahead and cover all of those 28 IP prefixes simply. And another way we can verify is by looking the AS path attribute. So you can see that these are the AS path attribute is set for 1 for all of these IP prefixes around. So in that case, let's say we want to go ahead and filter only certain routes or certain prefixes that we are receiving from R2 and ISP1. So we can go ahead and configure the IP prefix list. So before we do that, let's go to the router R2 and reconfirm what are the different subnet or IP prefixes that it is advertising towards ISP1. We see this output on ISP1, but let's take a look at from R2's perspective also. So the command, I'm sure all of you must be familiar by this time, is show IP BGP neighbor, and we need to go ahead and provide our neighbor IP address, which is 172.16.12.11, and we are interested in taking a look at the route this router R2 is advertising towards this neighbor. And we could see that these are the different prefixes or route that this R2 is advertising toward this particular neighbor, and we could see that these are the 5 IP prefixes that are being advertised by R2 towards your ISP1. But let's say our ISP1, because as I said again, the 24 subnet would cover all of these different, smaller subnets. In that case, we can go ahead and, really only filter on the ISP1/24, because again, as I said, the /24 would go ahead and cover /28. So that way we are only restricting, we are only filtering certain route that we are receiving on the ISP1 side. Again, we are doing this from ISP perspective. If these are two enterprises, you can go ahead and implement this on either side, depending on which side want to do the filtering. So in our case, we'll go ahead and apply this filtering on this ISP router 1. And again, as we said, for this, we will go ahead and make use of the IP prefix list. So let's go ahead and use the IP prefix list. And after the IP prefix list, you need to go ahead and give it a name. So we can say from R2, whatever name that you want to do. Now, what do you want to do with this prefix list? Do you want to deny certain thing, or do you want to permit certain thing? If we need to deny, we would have to write, multiple rules, because there are a few multiple /28 IP prefixes. Instead, we'll just go ahead and simply use the permit, and in the permit, we'll only allow the IP prefix that we are interested in receiving from our router R2, which is the 10/24. So let's go ahead and use the permit keyword. And if you take a look at with the IP prefix, it's expecting an IP prefix. And I'm sure by this time you all know the IP prefix is a combination of the network slash and the number of the bits that you are turning on. So in this case, the network that we are interested in is 10.0.0.0/24. So let me go ahead and take that one. So we went ahead and just configured this IP prefix list. We haven't applied this prefix list. Again, just like some of the filtering that we have done, the IP prefix list is also applied at per neighbor level. In this case, the ISP1 happens to be only neighbor with router R2, but if let's say you had multiple neighbor relationship, multiple eBGP sessions, so we can go ahead and configure this at per neighbor level. So in this case, let's go inside our BGP process. So the BGP process on ISP1 is 100. I'm sure you recall. And now the neighbor, this would be the IP address of our router R2, so 172.16.12.2. And if you press a question mark here, there are a couple options that we can go ahead and specify. And one of the options, it says prefix list. Filter updates to or from this neighbor. So we can go ahead and make use of prefix list. Again, prefix list is a mechanism to filter the updates that you are receiving or going to send to this particular neighbor. So we'll go ahead and use the keyword prefix list. And the name of the prefix list, we had said the prefix list is from R2. Now in what direction we want to do? So anytime, because we saw that we were receiving all of these routes or all of these prefixes from R2. So that means when we are receiving these updates, that is the time we want to go ahead and apply this prefix list to filter all of these. So that means it would be in the incoming direction. Now simply go ahead and apply this in the incoming direction. Exit out of our BGP config. Now let's go ahead and take a look at on the BGP process again. So we can simply say show IP BGP. And again, the changes has not been applied. Again, I'm sure you remember that the filtering would only happen anything we receive after that. So we can go ahead and simply go ahead and clear the IP BGP process. So let's go ahead and do that and just wait a couple seconds. So the neighborship went down and it came up. Now let's take a look at the show IP BGP summary. Okay, we are receiving one prefix here already. So let's go ahead and wait a few more seconds and then we'll go ahead and take a look at our IP BGP table. Let's take a look at our BGP table now. Show IP BGP. And now we could see that ISP1 router is only seeing one prefix from router R2. Earlier, before we applied this prefix list that we went ahead and configured here, and once we applied this into our neighbor level, we were seeing multiple of these prefixes with /28 and 124. Now we are only seeing one prefix with /24. That is being seen on router ISP1. But if we go back and take a look at on R2, and take a look at what R2 is still advertising toward the router ISP1 in this case. If you see the router R2 is still advertising the same number of prefixes towards ISP1, because remember, we have applied this prefix list onto the incoming direction on the ISP1 router. That is, from router R2's perspective, R2 is still advertising all of these prefixes. But in this case, ISP router 1 is the one who is doing the filtering for these routes, and it's selectively making the decision that which are the prefixes that it needs to really import and needs to allow in the BGP table, and what are the prefixes it needs to go ahead and simply drop. And we went ahead and did with the help of the IP prefix list. So for this demonstration, you configured the IP prefix list, and where we only allowed one specific prefix list that we are interested in. So guys, this is a very important, very powerful concept in BGP. Anytime that you work with, the way you can go ahead and make use of this concept to go ahead and start filtering or selectively allow the prefixes that you are interested in, receiving or allowing inside your BGP route table. That'll be all for this episode. I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you.